The June 8th meeting of the Ways and Means Subcommittee will now come to order. Will all please rise and salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please, of the members and those in attendance?
Roll call of the members. Councillor Keefe.
Here.
Here. Councillor Novoselsky is absent. Councillor Sereno.
Here.
Here. Council President Visconti.
Here.
Here. And Chairman Rizzo.
Here.
Here. Also with us is Councillor Cogliandro, Councillor Morabito, and Councillor Silvestri.
I'd like to thank the councilors that are here. Appreciate your attendance. This obviously is one of the more important functions that this city council undertakes each and every year. I want to, in advance, thank the clerk, Ashley Melnick, for putting together the schedule. I want to thank in advance the department heads that are here that will be presenting their budgets. We have a 2-hour block here that we have blocked off, and it looks like we've got 8 or 9 different departments making presentations, so I'd like to ask those department heads to try to make your presentation quickly so we have time for councilors who may have questions to ask. Before we get started, our Director of Finance, Rich Visquet, wants to give us a brief overview, so at this point in time, I'll turn it over to our Director of Finance, Rich Visquet.
Thank you, Councilor Rizzo. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for showing up and listening to my brief overview of the budget. I did hand out all of the narratives for the departments that are presenting tonight, attached with job descriptions for new jobs that are being proposed, and I also have distributed some information on the ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act funds that I will review as part of my budget presentation. So. First slide, please, Ashley. All right. The proposed 2023 operating budget is makes up of the general fund, which is $206,953,284. The city side is $46.3 million. The schools is $110.8 million, which includes both the Revere the Revere Public Schools and the North Shore Vocational School, and the fixed costs that are shared between the city and schools of $48.8 million. We do have 2 enterprise funds in the city. We have a water and sewer enterprise fund and a solid waste enterprise fund. Those 2 budgets combined make up $33.7 million, with the total budget before you of $239,690,838. So, just briefly, in the general government side of the operating budget, you will see a new talent and culture department, which you'll hear about tonight. I will also mention that both Unit A and Unit B contracts, which are basically the management contracts and the labor contracts for the city, have been settled, and all respective raises and salary adjustments are part of the 2023 budget. For public safety, we did settle a 3-year contract with the firefighters union, as well as the Metro North Regional Emergency Communication Center, which is our 911 service that both the city of Revere and the town of Winthrop collaborate with. Those contracts have been settled, and all of those CBAs are reflected in the 2023 budget. The police patrolmen and superior officers collective bargaining agreements are not settled. They are in progress. So what you'll see is level funded budgets from their last contract that we have settled. So there's no raises contemplated within the police department budget. You will notice that the mayor's budget does have a contingency for those settled contracts once done. We do have a particular interest in funding for training within public safety and maintaining of the staffing levels of our uniformed police and fire departments, which is a key component of the administration's commitment to public safety. Education, Revere Public Schools are funded in compliance with the Department of Education, DESE's regulations, their spending requirements, and one thing you may hear about during our school budget talk is the rising cost of transportation. We spoke a little bit about it at Monday's council meeting, but those costs have skyrocketed, and we are working collaboratively with the schools to try to address those, but we can speak more of that when the school department is here. We do have Northeast Vocational School has an appropriation both for the operational expense and the first payment of the capital assessment, which has to do with their new vocational high school. Those operational and capital assessments are both included in the appropriation request for the Northeast Vocational School. With Public Works, the DPW contract is still open. That contract has not been settled, so the DPW budget reflects the wages as they stand as of the collective bargaining agreement that expired on June 30th, 2021. We do have a new DPW facility underway. It's a $25 million budget for that. All the contracts have been signed, and I believe that the groundbreaking will be very soon on that facility, which is very exciting. We did settle a new solid waste contract that does realize savings of about $130,000 per year. Within that contract, we have negotiated with the Revere Housing Authority, which we had picked up as part of our contract for years. The city had went to the Housing Authority and asked them for an apportioned amount to pay for their share of trash collection. They had sought out other alternatives to pick up their trash, so as of July 1st, Capital Waste and the City of Revere's contract will exclude pickup from the Housing Authority's properties. Some of that we can talk a little bit more about during the DPW budget. Our debt service for our trash barrels that we bought through that program has been satisfied. That service is paid, which contributes to the savings within that solid waste budget. And we do have a new departmental revolving fund proposed to handle the payment and disbursement of new barrels as needed for the community. Health and Human Services, there's been some reorganization of departments to help prioritize the health and wellness of the residents. Next slide, Culture and Recreation. We have created a new travel and tourism department through the American Rescue Plan Act, and you'll hear more about that budget on the date of recreation. We have increased some funding for the library, both operational and capital, including facility improvements and new bookmobile that we have proposed being funded through the capital plan, which will allow better access to the library and its books and its programming. So that's an exciting point to come up. We do have a new aquatics department under Park and Recreation that we have assumed from the school department. That also is going to be funded through a revolving fund proposed for the council to adopt, where revenues that come in from those operations will help to pay for lifeguards and managers and associated costs with the pool. And the creation of the Haas Health and Wellness Center is underway, and that is also an ARPA-funded project. And like I said earlier, we will talk a little bit about ARPA funds and their use during my budget presentation later on this evening. As far as debt service, all the debt service payments for the DPW facility, the DCR facility, and the Point of Pines Fire Station are all fully bonded and funded within the debt request for fiscal year 2023. We did sell those bonds earlier last year to take advantage of the favorable rates, which seems like a pretty good move now. The rates are going up, but the increase in debt service does contemplate the full debt service of those three facilities. They have hit the books in 2023. As far as pension and benefits, our health insurance rates are level funded for fiscal year 2023. We did have a very good year in 2022, which allowed us to stabilize the health insurance costs, which is a benefit for both our employees and the city itself. Pension assessment has gone up to 6.6%, and that's in accordance with the PERAC actuarial study that has our pension liability fully funded by 2034. Any questions? Should I just move on? All right. So as far as the revenues go, basically, it's the following categories make up the revenues of the city. The tax levy, including the new growth, local receipts, state aid, other financing sources, and enterprise fund revenue, which comes in from our water and sewer rates and our trash operation. The tax levy itself, actually, next slide, would be $102 million in fiscal year '22. We get a 2.5% natural growth of our tax levy, which is $2.5 million. Estimated new growth of $3 million leaves us with an estimated tax levy of $107.6 million. This tax levy is an estimate. New growth requires final approval of the Department of Revenue, typically certified around November, early December. And the new growth accounts for all the new growth accounted for by the Board of Assessors. You'll hear a little bit about the Board of Assessors budget this evening. The tax levy is the maximum taxes the city can raise as part of balancing its budget. So we cannot tax more than the tax levy allows, and this budget complies with those Department of Revenue regulations. Local receipts in the city are revenues received and collected that are not reserved for any special purpose. Our projected local receipts are $18.6 million. Our local receipts are projected to increase 21.7% from fiscal year '22 due to some anticipated increases in the recovery from the COVID, including motor vehicle excise tax estimated at $6.7 million, licenses and permits at $3.8 million, rooms excise tax of $2.2 million, and meals excise tax of $1.2 million. Those are some of the larger ones that the city expects to receive this year, and you have a full list of all of those local receipts within your budget. The third local receipt that, the third revenue source that the city realizes is the cherry sheet revenue, or the state aid revenue, which is mostly made up of our Chapter 70 and charter school revenues from the state. Those revenues are projected through Department of Revenue's estimates per the Senate Ways and Means budget of $87.4 million. There is unrestricted general government aid, otherwise known as UGA, and those revenues are expected to be $11.9 million, again, from the last budget of the Senate Ways and Means, which is the latest budget numbers that we have. Chapter 70 and charter school revenues have increased by $4.7 million this year, and most of that is due to the governor's commitment to funding the Student Opportunity Act, and that money can only be used for educational purposes. The yoga money has increased $611,000 and can be used for any legal municipal purpose. Other financing sources are just any revenues that do not represent the tax levy, the local receipts, and cherry sheet. And as part of the 2023 budget, we are not proposing to use any other financing sources to balance the budget. Enterprise fund revenues are revenues that come in from our business type activities, which are our water and sewer operations and our solid waste operations. Fiscal year '23 estimated revenues for the water and sewer department would be $31.8 million. That is $28 million estimated from user fees, assuming that a rate is voted on at one of the upcoming meetings, as well as a proposed $1 million appropriation from our water and sewer stabilization account, a $900,000 appropriation from our certified retained earnings, and $1.5 million from ARPA funds. Without those appropriations from stabilization and retained earnings and ARPA, the city would be looking at nearly a 17% rate increase. So the mayor's requesting appropriations from the reserves and retained earnings to relieve ratepayers of these higher water and sewer rates. And we are proposing a 3-year rate structure strategy to try to stabilize the rate increases to the ratepayers due to some of the debt service and fixed costs that we have no control over, including Mass Water, Resource Authorities, assessments to us for our water and sewer. Our fixed costs went up $2.5 million in our water department. None of those are in our control. It leaves us in a tough position this year. And again, our strategy is to try to use some one-time revenues from stabilization and retained earnings and some ARPA funds to stabilize those rates at 4.25% for the next 3 fiscal years. And we could talk more about that during those budgets. So as far as expenses go, our city expenses are broken into general government, public safety, public works, health and human services, and culture and recreation. On the next slide, you'll see the expenses as requested in the 2023 budget would be $9.5 million for general government operations, $28.5 million for public safety operations, $4.3 million for public works, $2.3 million for health and human services, and $1.5 million for libraries and recreation. Total general government appropriation, $46.3 million. Fixed costs are basically the costs that are shared between the cities and schools, including our health insurance, our pension assessment, debt service, our Medicare and FICA taxes, and our property and casualty insurance. Those numbers are listed before you with a total fixed cost sum of $48.8 million. Education expenses, both expenses from the Revere Public Schools as well as the Northeast Vocational School. Those appropriations in total are $110.8 million, with Revere Public School being the lion's share at $108.6 million, and the Northeast Vocational at $2.2 million. Again, these appropriations are in compliance with DESE's guidelines, and they meet minimum net school requirements as dictated by DESE, and also contemplates the Schedule 19, whereby employee benefits, pension obligations are netted out between the schools and the city. The Northeast Vocational School does include the operational $1.8 million for their operating and $336,000, which is the capital assessment for fiscal year 23 for the new vocational high school. The Water and Sewer Department, looking at $1.7 million in salary, $1.2 million of expenses, $7.6 million debt service, $6.3 million of assessment for MWRA water, and $12.4 million of MWRA sewer. Our solid waste enterprise fund, salaries of $423,000, expenses of $22,800, contracted services of $3.9 million, and capital expenses of $15,000. Total solid waste, $4.3 million. And finally, our other expenses are expenses that the city has to bear and reflect in its tax rate recap certification, but not necessarily appropriated by this body. And the lion's share of that is the cherry sheet expenses. So the state gives us money for such things as school Chapter 70. They give us money for unrestricted government aid, but they also give us assessments for tuition out of district for those students that go to other schools outside the city. Retired teachers are part of the retired teachers insurance policy through the GIC, so that's an assessment to the city, $2.3 million. The MBT assessment is $4.3 million this year, which is much higher than previous years, and to be honest, I'd like to look into what is driving that. I think it's up $700,000, so I don't know if we're getting $700,000 more worth of service or what, but there is a significant increase in our assessment from the MBTA. There is a small offset cherry sheet receipt that goes directly to the library at $136,000. And the other smaller amounts on there that equal $438,000. So those cherry sheet assessments actually in total are $17 million. And the last two numbers that we're responsible for are our overlay that we raise for abatements, exemptions, and such. $922,000 is what we're projecting to raise on the recap. And for fiscal year 23, we have a snow and ice deficit of $710,000, which is required to be raised as part of the following fiscal year's recap if not funded within the 2022 budget. So that's a quick summary of the numbers. The budget is balanced. It's a responsible budget that continues to bring back staff and services that were lost during the pandemic. The budget is presented in accordance with the GFOA Distinguished Budget Award, which the city has received, I believe, for its 8th straight year this year. We do have some collective bargaining agreements that are not settled. And again, reserves for those settlements are budgeted within the mayor's salary reserve account. One thing that's worth noting, and we can talk a little bit more about it after, but the city has successfully negotiated health insurance benefit modifications with the Public Employee Commission, the PEC. And in summary, in fiscal year 2025, contributions will change from 20% employee share to 22.5 employee share, which is a benefit to the city to try to slow down the cost of the city's portion of health insurance. With that negotiation, the employees will receive a 0.75% raise on that last day of fiscal year 24. And plan design does remain the same, so no changes in co-pays, no changes in doctors or anything like that, just strictly a shift of the contribution rates between the employees and the employer. I will have a comprehensive financial forecast for you last year, and again this year I'm happy to give you that presentation before next Thursday's final budget hearing, and happy to answer any questions. Hope that was short enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rich. And rather than take questions now, I think we should get right into it. In the interest of our department heads that are here tonight, we'll hear from them. You've already expressed the fact that you're going to be here till the end. So, you know, what we'll do is we'll just start the process here. We'll go according to the schedule. And first, we have Mayor Arrigo here to present the mayor's budget for FY23. Mr. Mayor?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, councilors. Happy to be here once again. I'm happy to run down some of the changes in our budget, but I'd offer also to open it up if anyone has any bigger, broader questions about the budget as a whole. So for my office, you'll see the biggest change is as the Chief Financial Officer mentioned, the reserve account that we have for contract negotiations has been brought down from $700,000 down to $500,000. That is in anticipation of settling the patrol officer's contract, the superior officer's contract, and the DPW contracts that we have outstanding. Other than that, relatively level funded, and happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Okay, just, I'm sure everybody's already on the page. It's section 2, page 4. Any counselors have any questions for the mayor right now? Members of the committee first.
Just a quick question on that that reserve account. We reserved 700. Obviously, it's. I'm happy to see that it has reduced. The $200,000 delta. Where is it coming from, and what was the actual number for 2022?
For 22, yeah. So I think Rich can give you the number for 22, but the 700 we had as a place. Sorry. So 700 was a placeholder for going into contract negotiations. Nobody had been settled yet. So we've settled so far fire,
Okay.
Unit A, Unit B in City Hall, our 911 call takers, and there may be a couple of other that we've settled. So that 700 funded some of that. We expect that we'll need the 500 for settling police, patrol, and superior officers, and DPW.
Okay.
And so of the 700, Rich, was all of it spent in 22?
Well, right now, the $700,000 remains in there, and those transfers will be made at year end to square up all the budgets. It's not as if we move that money right away because of turnover in departments. So right as we get closer to the fiscal year end, we will move those salary reserve accounts to the proper budgets to make sure that there's no deficits from the settlement of those contracts.
Okay. And I guess my question was trying to figure out in terms of estimating the 700, well, you know, and I know some of them haven't been settled, so it's kind of hard to actually get an actual number of what that 700 may be. It's going to be less, and how much less from what was originally budgeted.
Honestly,
Does that make sense?
I believe I understand what you're asking,
Okay.
but strategically, we don't really like to break down exactly what that 700,000 is for, because you're in collective bargaining and you don't want to necessarily show your hand. So these are just estimates that we have put in there to settle all of the union contracts, and some may be more favorable than others, and different things may affect each one. But
Enough said.
We don't want to
Thank
write.
you.
We don't write the roadmap. Thanks.
And one other thing I'd say, what we tried to do in negotiations, we wanted to make sure that there would be a pot of money available for contract settlement, right? So that we weren't necessarily coming up here and asking for additional appropriations and having to go through that. So we try to ballpark it and figure out, okay, we'll plug a number for contract settlement, and hopefully we come close to that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Keith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the mayor. This is a nominal amount, but I just had it's more of all of the departments. I noticed a lot of the sick leave buyback. I was under the impression that a few years back we had determined, or we were working on basically use it or lose it with vacation and time off. So it's not a lot, but more so for the real world mentality, especially where I know that from the administrative standpoint, there's a lot of work from home days, especially with remote work has become a little bit of the norm in the last 2 years, understandably. So it's one of those where I was under the impression a few years back we kind of got rid of the golden parachute systems and vacation time. It's a use it or lose it mentality. Where that was the new negotiation. Where are we at with that, and why are we still seeing sick leave buyback?
So sick leave buyback is still a piece of the contract negotiations that we have. So all of our collective bargaining agreements have sick leave buyback kind of programs built into them. What I think you're referencing is the fact that there were some folks that had been grandfathered in and had an enormous amount of vacation time, sick time, and other things. So the sick leave buyback is for the average city employee is a part of their contract, and it's something if they don't take sick time, they get paid. They get paid an amount for not taking sick time. And I don't want to confuse the two, but what we had an issue with, and what I think you've seen memos from the chief financial officer on, are folks that had backlogged vacation time, sick time, and we were trying to clean that up and say, you need to use this time. We're only going to allow you to carry over what is allowed per your union contract. Unfortunately, historically, there were commitments made to people that they were allowed to keep their time running. And so we tried to clean that up a little bit. But the sick leave buyback, and Rich, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about it, but sick leave buyback is something that has been in the collective bargaining agreements throughout the city for a very long time.
Understood. And I certainly don't want to get into the middle of the collective bargaining, but I would just, again, going into the future, if remote work is still going to be the ability to use remote work is going to be in play. I just think it's something that you may want to look at restructuring when it comes to those negotiations down the road. If it's in person and then they're actually using sick time or not using sick time, that would be a difference. But I think that we all know that the remote work can sometimes be taken advantage of, and that's just the truth, right? So I would recommend if that's going to be an option in the future, that you might want to revisit that from a contract standpoint. Thank
Yeah,
you.
just to be clear, the collective bargaining agreements do allow for 1 week of sick leave buyback if you use 2 or less days in the fiscal year. So that's the sick leave buyback portion. As far as buyouts, when people retire, those benefits have been slowly reduced and tried to eliminate those golden parachutes, as you call them. But the sick leave buyback is actually something that's supposed to reward people that show up to work and don't use their sick days as vacation days, so to speak. So that liability is consistent throughout the collective bargaining agreements.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the committee? Councilor Sereno, did you have any questions? Councilor Morabito, did you have a question?
I just need some clarification. So is my colleague talking about the sick leave buyback as a city whole or in the mayor's budget?
I was speaking about it in the mayor's budget, but also curious about it from the whole standpoint, correct?
So is it hidden in one of these line items on the mayor's budget?
It's right there, the third line item.
Yeah, but there's nothing being appropriated. There's zero, right?
Yeah, we have,
It's being funded.
Yeah. Well, for fiscal year 2023, line item 3, sick leave BB?
Correct. It's not being
So,
requested.
yeah, there's nothing being requested, right?
But it's being used.
Okay.
and just to be.
And generally, Rich, go ahead.
I
just-
just
I think
want to
we're gonna
make
say the same
sure
thing.
we were all on the same page here.
Just to be clear on that, again, I don't, when I started working here, we created a sick leave buyback stabilization account that we have money that we pay those weeks that are bought back by people not using their sick time at the end of the year. It didn't make much sense for me to tie up a week's salary of every single employee if they do not realize the benefit of only using 2 or less sick days. So those transfers and expenses are covered with year-end transfers usually. So we wait till the end of the fiscal year. If your department has 5 people, I didn't want to tie up 5 weeks of salary in that account if only 2 people were
Well,
entitled to it.
that's
So
why I just wanted clarification, because
the question's
it wasn't
valid.
like
I
there's
just-
an army of people in the mayor's office, so I just wanted some clarification, make sure I was on the same page with it.
What you're really seeing is the
My colleague.
liability that
If
was
they are, they're
incurred in
hidden.
22 and 21.
Sorry, I said if they are, they're hidden, because I don't know where they are.
Yeah, like I said, we don't appropriate them up front because we don't know exactly who's gonna realize that benefit, so it's funded after the fact.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. I don't see anybody else with any more questions, so I appreciate your attendance.
Thanks,
Thank you so
everyone.
much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Next up will be talent and culture for the edification of the councilors, Section 2, page 7.
Good evening.
Hello.
Chairman, councilors. This is my first, so feel free to guide me. I'll go over, I know you all have read it and we can take questions, but I am the, Chief Officer of Talent and Culture, newly created department in the city. Our mission and vision is to promote a culture that values and supports diversity and inclusive excellence throughout the municipality and beyond in the city of Revere. Been in the job for about 6 months now. We've got a lot accomplished. I'm actually very proud because I tend to think it takes about a year to get the assessment observation and really start doing some intentional work. But we're 6 months in and we've got some good headway. And a lot of that is due to the work that's happened prior to my arrival here in the city of Revere. So you'll see some accomplishments here include, of course, the establishment of the office, hiring and onboarding my position. We successfully participated in a 21-day racial equity habit building challenge. That was an opportunity to start normalizing education around building our diversity, equity, and inclusion lens. Very proud to have established a citywide special events task force that's underway. Our first successful event was the Pride flag raising. We have Juneteenth celebration coming up June 18th, as well as a Pride Tea Dance party to end our celebration and recognition of Pride Month. I was going to share about our wellness fair coming up in the hub, but I'll leave that for human resources. Of course, as appointed as the chair, as the executive director of the Human Rights Commission, we have been successful in having a few meetings consecutively. We've established a working group, so we're really going to start seeing some of that work come to fruition. And definitely should note that in the state of Massachusetts, we have a coalition that brings together DEI representatives from different municipalities. So whether it's a chair of a diversity committee in that town or city, or an official position similar to mine, and I serve as the co-chair for that coalition. We have just over 20 individuals coming into this position, and we actually just produced a guide. Hopefully you all received that. I sent that to all users in the city so that you can get a sense of what the best practices are around hiring this position, establishing this position, and making sure that it's prepared for success. So we are definitely a leading force and voice, I'd say, in what diversity, equity, and inclusion work looks like in municipal government. So I'll stop there. We do have a number of goals, as you can see, and objectives that will really cut across the entire municipality. But I'll open up for questions.
Thank you very much for that presentation. I'll open it up now to members of the committee. Do any committee members have any questions? We're going to go committee members first. No one on the committee has any questions? Council President Visconti.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Dr. Barros. I want to first say welcome to the city of Revere.
Thank you.
It's great to have you. I want to, I guess I just got the description today, and I just didn't, I haven't had a chance to review usually the summary of what the department heads or that department does on a regular basis. And I guess where it's a new department,
Sure.
if we can start off by, helping myself and maybe some of the residents as well understand exactly what talent and culture means,
Yeah.
in the city of Revere, and the day-to-day activities that you're taking part in. It's a question.
Yeah.
We don't know, and I guess I'd love to hear from you. And before we get into numbers or anything like that,
Yeah.
responsibilities, stuff like that. If we can elaborate a little bit on that, that would be great.
Sure, absolutely. It's a question I get often.
Okay.
So many people are not clear. And when we're calling it talent and culture very intentionally, because this work is, basically what we're trying to do with this work, and in my role, is to develop the capacity of all employees especially to effectively engage with it and across difference, if I can put it in a broad sense. Meaning, regardless of who steps in front of us and how they identify, that we have the ability to effectively service that individual. My role varies from day to day. I am here to actually serve across the municipality. So I have a role of really building bridges, making connections. So I have a strategic eye around what's happening within the organization, working obviously very closely with your mayor and mayor's cabinet to be sure that we are assessing our goals and bringing into the center those that are typically in the margins. And we're also looking, as I said, to develop the skill sets and capacity for individuals to be able to engage, again, within and across difference. On a day-to-day basis, I could go from coaching and consulting to being a thought partner for strategic planning. I could go to literally hanging up flyers to make sure people are aware of what's going on. I'm knee-deep in event planning right now, but also working collaboratively within the municipality as well as the school district. So there's a lot to what I do day to day. So of course you can read in the job description, but I also encourage you to take a peek at the guide that was developed by the Mass Coalition, because it helps you understand what this role is and what it takes for us to collaboratively be successful. I'll say that because it's new to municipal government as well, we are still defining what does that look like when it comes to my role in city council, for example. So there are things that we are defining as we're building, but really, I'm here to make sure that we have an equity lens centered in our work, and it cuts across everything we do. So we're not trying to create a siloed experience, but instead infuse diversity, equity, and inclusion into the very fabric of our organization. And in this case, it's not just an organization, it's an entire municipality, right? So it takes an even broader view and intentionality, relationship building. You're dealing with, honestly, cognitive, emotional, physiological, I mean, everything, the way people think, feel, all of that is incorporated in my job. So it is very complex, and on a day-to-day, I can be doing very different things that go from visionary to logistical day-to-day stuff. So I hope that's helpful to give you a sense. And residents should know, you all should know, I am here to serve in a consulting and coaching role as well, if you're thinking about different ways to reach inclusive excellence in the things you do day to day or the organizations you're a part of. That's what I'm here for as well.
Thank you very much. Councilor Sereno.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Council President Visconti basically took my question, where this is a new department. But first, welcome to Revere. We're excited to have you on board. I just have one question, more so, I guess, for the city auditor, as we get into the numbers. I know we've been through this with other departments, with regard to appropriations of other salaries in terms of the salary. So when a salary is one number and then it says other salary, where does that second number, Mr. Chairman, through you to the CFO, where does that come from?
Other sources are typically other non-general fund appropriated sources, which would typically be your grant accounts. In some cases, you'll see us using ARPA funds to fund positions, but there's also other grants such as the CDBG accounts. Any type of grant that we get that has administrative dollars attached to it, we can use those administrative dollars to pay for salaries. We do use our health insurance trust to pay for the administration of the health insurance trust through the Human Resource Department, which you'll see. So basically it's, and we do have a breakdown of all of those different sources as they relate to each of these departments that I can provide you. But it's basically just non-general ledger accounts, special revenue accounts for the most part.
If I could just comment on that, looking at the salary sheet, it looks like it's an educational incentive. At least that's what you have down on here.
I'm sorry, I may have misunderstood. Is it other salary or other sources? I may have answered the wrong column.
He said other salary.
Oh, other salaries is typically your education, your travel. I apologize for that. I was on the wrong column. Other salaries is typically the education incentive, travel allowance, any specialty stipends that a job may have. But for the most part, it's usually the education, which is typically 3.5% for an associate's, 7.5% for a bachelor's, and 10% for a master's. Sorry about that confusion. Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you. Councilor Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Dr. Barros.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming here today. And I was going to ask a similar question on the other salary sources, and I just wanted to ask, was that specifically, so the last line on your first page, you know, just going through the budget, Group 2, community school, it's cut off, but was that a new position requested?
That community school is, what we did as part of the 2023 budget is we moved our adult education courses under the talent and
Is
culture.
that from rec?
Which is from the rec,
Right,
yeah, so
okay.
that's FAT 2, and then
Right.
that position for Group 2 is a part-time position that is being.
Which is partially grant funded.
That position itself is completely grant
Oh,
funded.
wonderful, good.
Thank you.
And that was going to lead to my, two more questions. The second question was, your request for 2023 was a little greater than the mayor had appointed or appropriated, understandably. And I was just curious, is what, are you going to be missing something? I think your department's request was $345,426. The mayor's request was $290,000, so a difference of $55,000. That shortfall from the mayor's department to what your initial request was, is that going to, what was the additional services that may or may not be given or brought to the table?
I want to defer to Rich.
Some of
Was
those,
that translation?
some of those dollars were overlapping with the Human Resource Department with regard
Okay.
to training and such, and some of them were just budget cuts that we do make budget cuts throughout this budget to balance it, and unfortunately, we can't give every department what they request.
Sure,
but-
no, I
but-
know. I just like to hear what they wanted,
Some of that could have been attached to translation dollars.
Okay.
And it was just an overestimate and was able to bring that down to actual, right? That could have been part of it.
And then the last question was, it was going to go back to the grant funding. I know that a lot of departments that are, a little bit, it's certainly a hands-on leadership role, and the department itself is a little bit, it's unique and it's new. And I also know from a state and a federal standpoint, there's a lot of incentive to make this happen in all of our communities, as you can imagine. You look across the board, everyone is hiring in this department. So I would imagine it's very sought after, but I know that there's a push to make this part of our culture, and certainly as it should be. But I was curious, are there grants, are there more funding sources that you can help get into this department that will, be able to maximize what we're able to do in the city from your department standpoint?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's part of goals and vision, is to find other dollars. We need endless dollars when you think about diversity in the broad definition. That is expansive and can get extremely expensive. So we definitely want to find additional funding sources, and I'm looking to expand internship opportunities to come into the city to help start building that as we're, really building this department. I don't know if especially in hearing the question about what is the job function, I want you all to know that when we invest in a position like this, that becomes right now a one-person office, if you will, it's deemed as a heroic model in the research around this field. And we really want to be thinking ahead if we're looking to develop a unit model or a division model. But that's obviously for the future and for things for us to continue thinking about. And I want you all to know that this is something that I don't only do this for work. It's also been part of my academic research. So my research in my doctoral degree was on the lived experiences of chief diversity officers at predominantly white institutions in the Northeast. So I do have the background also to help us think strategically, and I know, baby steps as we're growing, and how do we find the way to collaborate so that we're sharing in resources, and again, not only thinking about diversity, resources, and funds only in talent and culture, right? And I also...
Doctor, I don't mean to cut you off, but we have 7 more department
Okay.
heads that we have to
A lot
get to.
of education around this department.
I think it might be a good idea to maybe, once the budget process is over, to maybe have you come up
Yes.
specifically to a city council meeting, because
That'd be
not
great.
just for the edification of those of us that are here, but other councilors that aren't here, it would be good
Yes.
to learn a little bit more about what your mission statement is,
Yes.
how you plan on accomplishing the goals that you've set out.
Yep.
And then we have time for other councils to ask questions.
Yes.
I'm just a little.
I appreciate that.
Fearful that we're running out of
Yes.
time for for your
Absolutely.
colleagues that are here tonight, and we have this scheduled till 7 PM.
Yes.
So if we could just, if there's anything pertaining to the budget,
Yeah.
the numbers specifically, if you have a question, Council
I
President
have
Visconti.
one,
Okay, go
one
ahead.
more question, if you don't mind, and I think this is more directed to Mr. Viscay. Last year, and this being a new department, okay, I remember last year as Chair of Ways and Means, we budgeted, I believe, about $85,000 for that salary. Correct me if I'm wrong, looking at last year's budget. The salary increased, okay, and when we voted on the budget, we changed the voting process where it separated salaries to expenses. So we voted on a salary number as well as an expense number. The increase, and maybe I'm mistaken, but the increase in that was given, and that's fine. But we as a body, as a council body, anything above that number, are we supposed to, my understanding was that we're supposed to approve that. And if I'm understanding it correctly, where it's been budgeted and we're voting on that number, aren't we supposed to approve the increase in that salary? Is that, if you understand where I'm going with it on that?
I understand completely. Last year, the position that was budgeted and approved was a director in the Human Rights Commission. That salary was correctly budgeted at $85,000. After the budget was adopted, we had no success filling that job at that salary. And during the fiscal year, the Division of Talent and Culture was created. The salary that was appropriated at $85,000 was enough to fund the current Chief of Talent and Culture through fiscal year 2022. So, I mean, as far as that goes, we're working off that appropriation in 2022.
I understand.
And now before you in
Great.
2023, we're trying to now pivot in with the new position and the new budget. So,
Okay,
so I think I hope that answers your question.
Does
If I
that-
could just add one thing to
Yeah.
it. So previously, my cabinet included a chief of human resources. What we did effectively was change, no longer have a chief of human resources, we have a chief of talent and culture with a human resources director underneath the umbrella of talent and culture. So the salary level that a cabinet member is at is consistent. So the HR chief was consistent at that level that Dr. Barros is at. The HR director was brought in at a level closer to the HRC director position, right? So it was a little bit of a flip-flop in terms of what we wanted to do and how I wanted to structure that division in
Yeah.
talent and culture, and having HR under that, because as you heard from Dr. Barros, what she's talking about, much like HR, it affects every piece of every corner of city government. So in restructuring, we had the money available to be able to kind of play around with it a little bit,
Yep.
and we flipped, effectively flipped the way that those positions are funded.
I understand, and I really think, Mr. Viscay, that portion of $85,000 was used towards the end of the year because she just came in to office, so I understand.
Yeah, we're not legally allowed to go over expend any appropriation on a salary expense, and if we were to hire a new position at money above and beyond what was budgeted for a full year, we would certainly have
You
to
would
come
have to come
before
back in
you.
front of us.
Unless, of course, there was another vacancy within that department, we do have some flexibility within that.
Understand, thank you. Thank you for clarification.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Dr.
Mr.
Barros, thank you very much for being here. We
Thank you.
appreciate it, and thank you for that presentation. We'll
have
be
the-
sure to have you come back up
Please.
sometime
Yeah.
after the budget process is over.
Yes, the City of Revere is doing great work and leading in this charge. So I really would like the time to help you all understand even the philosophy behind talent and culture versus chief officer of DEI. We can talk all about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that many of us, many councilors have other questions that we
Yes.
just can't get to during
Absolutely.
the budget right now.
Thank you.
So, thank you. Next up will be Human Resources. That would be Section 2, page 10. Claudia Correa.
Okay, good evening. Hi, Mr. Chair, council members. As you may know, my name is Claudia Correa. I'm the Human Resources Director for the City of Riviera. And I'm also new. As a matter of fact, today is my 6th month, so I'm still here. And I'm very excited to present to you our accomplishments along with our goals. So as you may have the description of what Human Resources does, I'm sure you're familiar with it. Just to remind you that our main mission is to support our employees, retirees, and residents of Riviera. One thing that I didn't put there, but it's definitely very important to make emphasis on, is that also our job is to make sure that the city is in compliance with the state and federal regulations around employees' rights and rules and regulations. So in regards to our accomplishments, we were tasked with making sure that we follow all the procedures and regulations around COVID-19 regulations, and making sure that we follow protocol. We work very closely with our employees, department heads, and making sure that we follow all the required protocols, once again established by the state and the federal government. We have created supportive programs and trainings to help employees. In addition to that, as you know, COVID accelerated all the access to technology, and we want to make sure that our employees are not left behind. And for that reason, obviously, we want to make sure that a lot of our processes are being digitized to give the employees access to all the forms and documentations they required. In addition to that, we upgraded our job descriptions to attract a broader pool of candidates, making emphasis on making a larger and broader outreach to Riviera residents. We implemented the employee engagement survey, and the main goal of this was to understand the needs of our employees and also to increase retention. We also have been working on setting up professional and personal development trainings to better support our employees, and that way they will feel more confident serving the public. As you can see, we actually have about 6 goals listed in the sheet that you have in front of you. But the main goal overall is to continue to provide support to our employees, to retain them. And like I mentioned before, we know that as we went through COVID, a lot of the employees that have been around for a while, they were not too comfortable with technology, and our goal was to make sure that we supported those employees so they also were brought up to speed so they feel comfortable and didn't feel left behind. Our retirees, we're very proud to say that we continue to support them as much as we can. They come in and see us every day pretty much with questions about their benefits, and we're very happy to provide them with the service. And we support all of the 2,000 plus employees across the city with benefits. Let me go back to that. And in addition to that, we respond to residents' inquiries when they have to provide us with compliments about our employees or if they have any questions or concerns. And once again, our main goal is to embrace technology. One of the main goals, as you may see on goal, our first goal, is to research on an employee service, self-service platform. That means that we want to be able to provide the employees a site where they can go and look at their payrolls, their accrual times. They'll be able to see their benefits, be able to change their contact information, emergency contact information, and so forth. So those are the big things that we're definitely looking into. And obviously, we want to increase and create a supportive, diverse, and inclusive environment amongst our new employees and obviously our current employees. That's pretty much what I have. And now, if you have any questions for me, please go ahead.
Council President Visconti, then Councilor Keith.
Thank you and welcome as well
Thank you, sir.
to the city. I want to dive into the expenses of the department, if I may. It looks like in 2022, we budgeted approximately $150,000 for what looks to be employee training, along with there was some budget numbers of for employee recognition, about $5,000, and some other legal services of $95,000. If we start off with the first one, year to date doesn't, we're budgeting again $150,000. Okay, but if you look at year to date, you're looking at approximately a $50,000 to $60,000 line item if we're going on a quarterly basis, up to 3 quarters. Why the increase in keeping it at 150,000, number one, and then employee recognition. I think we budgeted 5,000, and now there's a significant increase of about 50,000.
Sure, yes.
As well.
I'm
So, and just the legal services is increased by 20,000. So, can we get some explanation of those increases?
I can definitely speak around the trainings. Like I mentioned, we noticed that COVID impacted a lot of our employees, and some of them felt that they were being left behind, especially around technology and professional skills and so forth. We want to make sure that we continue to support them. As of right now, we're putting together professional and technical trainings for the employees. And when we talk about technical training, we're just not offering that to, let's say, the administrative staff or people that spend time in front of a computer for most of the day. We're also offering that to the field staff. That way they can see that the city is here to support them and make sure that they are up to date in regards to technology. Also, in regards to the trainings, we have seen that a lot of our supervisors and managers, they know their departments very well. They know the structure, but we see that there is always need to teach them more about leadership and proper management. Definitely, it is important that they know about the disciplinary process, but more about how to support their employees. So it's definitely a lot that we're throwing at the supervisors, managers, and department heads, and we're here to support them through those trainings. So we do believe that the trainings are definitely required. And in regards to employee recognition, Richie, I will defer to you on that since I wasn't here for previous years.
Yeah, Council Visconti, just to be clear, the employee recognition and training has definitely been increased in fiscal year '23 with the thought that, due to the pandemic and some of the stuff and pressures that have been put on the departments, we're really trying to invigorate employees and try to give them more recognition and opportunities to do some team building and such. So that is a new initiative. And again, that was one of those overlaps that Council Keith had mentioned. Why did talent and culture go down? And because some of that stuff was more better budgeted in the human resources. So the $50,000 is an increase. The reason why some of that employee training, we did have a turnover in our human resource department in the middle of the pandemic. So some of those initiatives that were driven by the former HR director kind of stalled as we got Claudia up to speed. So any dollars that aren't spent in '22 with regard to that training dollars will be diverted back to the general fund and turned into free cash. But we don't want to lose that opportunity to have those trainings in fiscal year '23. And your final question outside legal services is simply that the cost of our labor council has increased and it's budgeted accordingly to that.
Sure, and if may I add in regards to employee recognition, as you may know, it's even though we're putting our best efforts out there to recruit it's a little bit harder than before. So we definitely want to make sure that we're recognizing the current employees, and we're putting events together to make sure that they know we appreciate them, and that way we can increase retention a little bit better.
Yeah,
Thank you.
We're certainly having trouble finding, it used to be people would bill to have a city job, and it's kind of, things are turned on their ear now, and we're finding it hard to find employees that come in at certain salary ranges, and the turnover is happening because people are jumping and finding more opportunities out there. So, employee retention is an important factor. It's kind of it's a tough cost to realize and put on paper, but anytime a department head turns over, employee turns over, just the recruitment and the ability to bring them on, train them and get them up to speed is a cost. So some of the employer recognition is hopefully meant to retain the good staff that we have here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Ms. Correa.
Thank you,
And
Councilor.
I want to say that, I'm very happy that you're in this role. I was very happy when
Thank you.
the announcement came over. I think your qualifications and your and just what you've done, your past and history, being back in the city of Revere is excellent. So
Thank you.
I don't really have too many questions, but you mentioned platforms when it comes to hiring and software for employees. So I work in a corporate environment. We use Paycom. I've used LTPro. I'm very familiar with the systems. And one thing that drives me wild, I don't know where it comes out of the cost here, is I get a pay stub in the mail every few weeks, and I'm sure most employees do, even though it's direct deposit. And there's a cost to that, right? The mailing, the printing. Are you going to be able to shift the city onto some sort of a platform with an app or a web-based?
So my goal is to research those platforms. Obviously, we got to explore what we currently have with us, which is Munis. I understand they offer such platform, but like I said, my goal will be to explore that because, like you said, just the pay stubs for some employees and also privacy sometimes, and just to give them the access to their own information from anywhere, from any device. It definitely will make a huge difference. In regards to the hiring platforms, we historically have used our city website, but we have found out that we need to work with other platforms in order to recruit and be more proactive about it.
And there's a lot of big services out there that just pretty much take it all in. And like you mentioned, the privacy piece is really, really important. So I would be excited to see that. I think that you'd probably realize a savings. I don't see it as an expense here when it comes to payroll processing, but you're going to see it in payroll processing alone. And just the time alone that it's going to save. Vacation requests, all that stuff is just it's digitized. It's going to be, save you a lot of time and energy.
True.
So,
yes, thank you.
other than that, keep up the good work.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Councilor Silvestri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Claudia, I don't have a question. I just have a comment. And this is, I've heard multiple times, the employees of the city truly believe that you're in their corner and they have a person that's willing to fight and trust in them and they trust you. And I just want to commend you on that. In the short time you've been here, you've made an impact on a lot of people and it's being shown and voiced. So thank you.
Thank you. It means a lot. I look forward to working with everyone. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Cogliandro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Correa, I just want to, on a private note, thank you for your assistance earlier this year. And I want to say that you're doing a really great job, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm here to assist you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Seeing and hearing no other questions, Claudia, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Keep
sir.
up the good work.
Thank you, sir.
And thank you for being here tonight.
My pleasure. Thanks.
The edification of the council, Section 2, page 13, Office of Innovation and Data Management.
Good evening, Councilor. Good evening, Mr. Chair. Ruben Cantor, Chief Innovation Officer for the city, oversee Office of Innovation and Data Management and Revere 301. And I'm going to start by having Nick, the Director of 301, talk a little bit about 301, because I'm sure that probably is the thing you want to hear about most.
Mr. Chairman, Honorable Council, thank you. First, I just want to thank the council. Last year, we were able to hire additional call taker, which was very beneficial for our department. Now we're in our 5th year. We've seen substantial annual increase every year in its reach and use in the community. This year, we're on track for 40,000 calls and 8,000 service requests. 82% of those phone calls are answered in under 45 seconds, which is the industry standard for call center wait times. The additional call taker has been an important factor in achieving this metric. So again, we thank you for that support. As a fast-growing department, we quickly outgrew our space. We were right across the hall here. Probably could only fit like 3 of us. We're now right at the basement entrance, and we have a service window, which is just another additional channel for residents to interact with us in person and streamline constituent services for residents that come into City Hall. And then one last thing I'd like to mention is just to thank the departments that actually go out and handle all the requests. DPW, ISD, Building Department, without them, we wouldn't be get the recognition we do. So we're fortunate to have good collaboration and relationship across City Hall. So thank you.
Thank you, Nick. I just want to emphasize how great I think our 301 team is. We've built a really phenomenal team. They're incredibly responsive. They're really caring. They're really hardworking, and so I think we're really lucky to have them. So just a quick highlight on the budget, which may come up, is we're integrating a new program that is ARPA-funded program, the Community Liaison Program. We're piloting this through the ARPA funds to expand our 301 constituent service reach, being able to take Mobile City Hall, go out into the neighborhoods, go into community meetings, reach people where they are, and reach people, and a little bit of what Dr. Barrow said, reach people who are maybe a little harder to reach, more vulnerable populations that have not traditionally been a part of city government or engage with us. So I think we have a great opportunity with this program to reach new people and bring in constituent services into the neighborhoods. Ordinarily, I think I would also talk about a lot of the software launches that my department has, but actually what I want to do is just jump quickly to a quick story, which I think a year ago at this time, Councilor Serino brought up a issue that he saw in Boston where they had a software that allowed them to track special permits and ZBA. And I really appreciated you bringing that to here, and I hope that others will bring those kinds of issues too, because what we were able to do was actually leverage software we already had in the city to create that program. And you can now do a search. And I just want to give special thanks, especially to City Clerk Melnick, because I think this is a project she started, I think when you were an intern, in fact, building a spreadsheet that we were able to use that spreadsheet to tie into this software Tolemi that you can now go and you can look up all the property appeals. It automatically gives pretty much everything going back. I think it's like 100 years or something if you want to search that deep. So this is the kind of thing that excites me as Chief Innovation Officer, not the things that I think up, but the things that you or others in the city will come to us and say, what's a way that we can solve this problem? And thinking about, especially if we can find a way to do it that's basically free, but it's not always so easy. But if we can find those solutions. So I just wanted to pinpoint that, and I hope you'll come to me with other ideas like that. So with that, I will leave it to your questions.
Any members of the committee have any questions? Councilor Keith.
No, nothing long, but I had mentioned to Ms. Correa with that piece on some sort of payroll software. Is that something you'll be able to assist in?
So one of the nuances between IT and innovation is sort of where does that line draw? The HR functions are actually in Munis, and so not to throw my colleague under the bus, but I actually think that it would be better question asked to the IT side when that budget comes up, because the Munis projects are managed by him, and I think he's pretty aware of that request and certainly on it. So, but I appreciate the question.
Thank you very much. Councilor Visconti, Council President Visconti.
Through you to Mr. Cantor, I'm sorry. It looks as though on the salary side, we added is there a temps call center?
That position was-
Position that has been added, is that what I'm understanding? And is being paid by opera money?
I don't believe that position is added. That position was in last year's budget.
It
So it's a
wasn't-
continuation of an ARPA-funded 301 call taker position.
Okay, there's no date here for the service date.
Oh,
If whether or not it was, so to me, it looks as though it was added.
Our apologies.
Now, if we can elaborate a little bit on this community outreach liaisons, these being opera positions.
Yes.
Is it a short-term position? Is that, and when I say that, I mean by, is it something that we're going to use until opera money is done? Or what's the game plan there? You know, because it's great to have opera funds, you know, and, but there's a shelf life, and that's my major concern with that. And wondering if that is something, these positions are going to be short-term.
The positions the job description is listed as a temporary full-time position. So because it's a pilot program, the people who we would be hiring would have to know that it is only as good as the ARPA funds and the council allows us. So, I mean, that's kind of where that lands. And I think once the pilot is ended, we'll have a good understanding to a couple of years of data to determine whether this is something that really has benefited the city in the long run, and whether to fund that through the general fund or other grant funds. I imagine that there would be other grant opportunities out there that we can look for to keep it going if it was really successful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Anybody else have any Councilor Sereno.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I just want to thank Ruben, and through you, Mr. Chairman, I first want to thank Ruben and Nick. Nick, whenever I call 311 or whenever, most counselors, I think actually, we utilize 311 when constituents call us. And, so I appreciate you always taking our calls and for, helping out and getting things resolved for residents, whether it's a little pothole or what have you. And Ruben, thank you for that ZBA tracker. Usually the city of Boston doesn't, I don't like to do things the city of Boston does in Revere, but in that case, that was really good, so thank you. And through you, Mr. Chairman, I think to the CFO, more just a general question about ARPA to kind of piggyback on President Visconti's question. Is there a way, I know that, ARPA is at the discretion of the mayor, how it's invested, but a lot of residents have been calling and saying, the city got 30 million in ARPA. What are we doing with all of this money? Is there, I know that we're going through it and we're getting bits and pieces, and I think there is a presentation in here. Will you be presenting that at some point to the general public?
Yes, as at Councilor Visconti's request. Well, first of all, there was a request to do an ARPA review at a previous council meeting, and we've had a presentation waiting to give at Ways and Means, and I think there was some cross-up on exactly what was going to happen there, and we were waiting to come before the Ways and Means to give a presentation, and it didn't happen up to the budget. So when I talked to Councilor Visconti, I said, well, why don't I bring that presentation as part of my budget tonight? So you do have a bunch of the budgets to actuals, what's been committed, what's been expended, and some of the plans, and I can certainly go over that in a little more detail when it's my turn at the podium.
Thank you. Councilor Morbido.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my question is pertaining to security, as far as ransomware, antivirus software. As you've seen, like early in the year, hundreds of large-scale retail stores were impacted by ransomware, where they couldn't even, it impacted their payroll system, and they weren't even able to pay their employees. They had to manually calculate everything. It was a hot mess. As well as talking to other colleagues in neighboring cities there have been attempts of email hacking, and it has increased, and a lot more clickbait going on, and a lot more through the city servers. So I just want to make sure, you don't have to tell me what we're doing, I just want to make sure we have a plan in place.
Yeah. So let me just start by saying in 2020, we had a process in place to convert our server system from an in-house server to an off-site server, going from a company called TOS to a new server system that is, the name of the server, or the name of the company is Thrive. And we started that process right at the very time when Jorge Pazos, the IT director, started. And I think I want to let him talk a little bit about that because it's really what he manages more directly. But I have asked this question on a number of occasions just to confirm, and the mayor has asked us. I mean, this is a topic of ongoing conversation, of course, and I have a really great confidence in the systems we have, and I'll let Jorge talk about that.
Good evening. So to broadly answer the question, we use a variety, a layered approach to security for all of our information platforms. So, we have an email security gateway that is looking at email as it comes through. It's analyzing it, categorizing some as spam, categorizing some as suspicious. That email security gateway has what's called a sandbox. So even if you click on something, before it actually opens and executes it, it looks at it and then says, there is actually something suspicious in here, and clamps that down. So, we get calls all the time about people who, have an email hung up that's caught somewhere in that email security gateway. On top of that, we also offer security awareness training to all of our users. No matter what you do on the technical front, the human being sitting at a computer is the one that is going to click on a piece of ransomware, an infected file, a bad link. So we quarterly do cybersecurity awareness trainings for all staff. And we monitor that. We send out notifications, and we will periodically remind users, you really need to do this training, it's important. So there's a variety of things that we are doing to, I think, address the concerns that you mentioned.
So, as well as I do, every year these malwares, ransomwares, they get more sophisticated. So I know we've changed since in 2020, but are we constantly evolving and changing, evaluating our systems?
We do.
More frequently than 2 years, I would assume.
We are, and so a lot of the products that we use to grow and evolve to a lot of those threats as those threats evolve. When I do my part of the budget presentation, that's something that I will touch on, and some of the changes that we're looking to make the next fiscal year. Just to tighten up, constantly looking at tightening up cybersecurity, because what you're really saying is it's a cat and mouse game, right?
Exactly.
It's constantly, it's a moving target. So you have to constantly be trying to stay on top of that.
And speaking to other elected leaders and other employees and department heads in other cities, it seems to be continuing more and more this year and last year than any other year. It seems like there's more attempts to hack into for a security breach, basically.
Yeah, it's a constant barrage. I have sent out a few emails to staff. So I participate in a couple of different bodies. The Mass Cyber Resiliency Working Group. There's a lot of different groups like that. And there's a lot of information sharing that goes on, similar to, I think, what you just mentioned with when you talk to other communities. And we periodically will learn of something that is going on, and we have to send out a notification saying, we're somewhat vague about it because we don't have all the details always either, but we're saying, hey, there's that increased activity, please be extra vigilant at this point in time. So, to your point,
I appreciate your the information you provided me, I think, we're so used to opening emails every day, we don't realize how serious of an issue this could be, like holding our funds hostage and stuff like that. So I would just want to make sure we have good security measures. Sure. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Silvestri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ruben or Nick, this is probably a question for you, but I've had it come across a few times now, and I'm sure it comes to you as well in calls, but certain parts of the city, like if you're on the Everett or Malden border or East Boston and Beachmont, when they call 311, they end up getting Malden or Boston. Is there a way, and then I get everyone's moving to the 311 system, but is there any way to fix that, or is that just something that's a quirk that has to be dealt with?
Yeah, unfortunately, what that is it's where the cell tower sits. So there's really no way to confirm that someone who's sitting in a Revere address who hits a Malden cell tower or a Boston cell tower, because that's the closest to their address. So that's going to automatically forward to their 301 departments. We do communicate with those departments and make sure we try to get people to the right 301, but unfortunately, that's not a problem that we can really solve.
Thank you.
Right. So sorry. And so for those people who do know that that's an issue at their home, we have a direct number, the 10-digit number, and they should definitely be calling us there if they know this is going to be an issue. Thanks.
Council President Visconti.
I just forgot to mention, Nick, I want to commend you for doing a great job at 311. Everybody I talk to speaks very highly of you, and I know that position's not an easy position to handle, and you're the perfect person for it. So great job. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. We just had the IT director up here. If you don't mind, I think I might go out of order. He's already answered a bunch of questions, so maybe you could just present his budget, and then we can move on from there. So why don't we do that? We'll go a little bit out of order. We're now on Section 2, page 22.
Hi, good evening. So again, my name is George Pezos. I'm the IT director for the city. I'll try to go through my presentation quickly in the interest of time. Just real quick to recap what we did in 22, in large part because it informs what we're doing in 23 and what's in the budget in front of you. The major projects that we've been working on this year are the conversion of our collections system. Our existing collection system was a program called Harris Govern. We're moving that to Munis. We are now live doing billing and collections for motor vehicle, real estate, and personal property in the Munis program. This is part of a plan to consolidate the financial system into a single system versus the two separate systems that were in place before. As part of that, which you might have noticed, there's been a lot of improvements to the online payment experience for residents. So now when residents go in and when they pay a motor vehicle or a real estate, personal property, eventually when they can pay a utility bill online, it's a more natural online shopping experience. There's a cart. You can add multiple things to the cart. You can check out. You can do things like have automatic payments. You can have e-billing so that you get an email notification of your bill. So a lot of that is possible because we've changed the back-end collection system. We've also, as I just mentioned, we started working on the utility billing conversion. So that is scheduled to go live May of 23. So we'll be doing billing and collections for utility bills in Munis at that point in time. And at that point in time, we'll be able to start stepping away from the Harris Govern system that we currently have. We've also started work on a time and attendance or a punch card, a time clock type of a system. We're starting that in the DPW, and eventually I think that will grow out to other departments, and that dovetails nicely into the ESS, the employee self-service conversation that was mentioned earlier. All of these things that I just mentioned, they're in line with the goals that we stated for last year and what we budgeted for and what we said we were going to be doing in FY22. Shifting now to the budget before you for 23, generally the IT budget, what it supports is all of the software subscriptions and support agreements for a lot of the applications that we use. It funds the managed The service is through our managed service provider, which is Thrive, which Ruben had mentioned earlier, and it also covers our telecommunications costs. Our goals for the upcoming year, continued work on the financial system, the collection systems conversion to complete that utility billing piece. We're going to continue with infrastructure upgrades, computer replacements, network switching replacements. We want to implement an MDM, a mobile device management, and you'll notice that, I'll mention that in the budget coming up. But basically, that is a platform that we can use to centrally manage all of the mobile devices, cell phones and tablets that we issue to employees. That allows us to do things like make sure that they are patched, make sure that they're updated. Also allows us to throttle so that they can't overuse data. And we can also control which applications they can use on those mobile devices so that we can restrict things like the use of Netflix on these city-issued devices while in the field. We want to continue developing a cyber security incident response plan. Very quickly, we did an assessment earlier this year through the MIT Cybersecurity Center. They did an assessment of our operations, and some of their recommendations really focused around not so much our operations, but developing or more fully developing either policies or plans that we might have that we should have on hand. And then one other thing that we want to do is implement additional cybersecurity measures like multi-factor authentication, allow password self-service reset for employees. That makes life easier for both them and us and more secure. And as we get into the budget, there's a couple of lines that are different from years past, so I can highlight those and we can discuss those. But given that, sorry, I tried to race through that in the interest of time, but I'm happy to answer any questions you guys may have.
Okay, any members of the committee first? Any members of the committee have any questions? No, I think you've already answered a whole bunch of questions.
Okay.
So right now, it just comes down to the numbers and the budget itself. So if there's no counselors that have any specific questions regarding any line items, I don't think we have anything further for you. Council President Visconti?
If you can just explain the increase in computer contract services? I know we've gone over the million mark, so an increase of about 200,000 from last year's budget. Is that something? It's a pretty significant increase, so I'm just trying.
I don't know if you're looking at the same exact document that I am, but so there is can you see the detail below there that has the MS Govern and the Tyler Sass line items below that?
Yeah. I looked at, yes, but if we look at line item, it's $1,080,000, I think, was the total. Okay. I thought last year's budget it says here last year's budget was. I'm sorry. It's about it's about $100,000 old.
So
above, correct?
Yeah.
About
So
100. My numbers. I was looking at quarter three.
As we're moving away from Harris Govern and bringing on Munis,
Okay.
we're maintaining two in the interim, right? Because we need to keep Harris Govern is still running our utility billing collection, and we've transitioned over the other collection modules to that Munis application. So we're running two systems. So during that time period, we have to carry both, and that you see that increase in here.
Understandable.
Eventually, year over year, it's a $50,000 a year savings moving from Harris Govern to Munis. That's the move.
Thank you.
Sure.
I just have, thank you very much. I just have one question, going back to that Tyler Sass. Is this an every year charge that the city is going to have? Because, that, I think, to Councilor Visconti's question, that is a large amount of the, I think last year, the FY22 budget was $964,000. Now it's up to $1,080,000. So that's a big chunk of it. What specifically is that for? I'm sorry, maybe I missed it along your explanation.
So the Tyler Sass is eventually will be the entire financial system for the city. So there's two components to that right now. There's what we've traditionally always had, which is payroll, HR, budgeting, all of the accounting functions that are in that Munis application. And now we're bringing on the collections modules. So the first piece of that I described, we paid $227,000 annually for that through a subscription model. The collections piece adds $80,000 a year to that. That $80,000 is, those collections pieces are what's going to replace Harris Govern, which was, at last check-in was $137,000 a year. So that's that $50,000 delta that we're talking about. The other thing too is, to note is the way Tyler does their contracts, they fix in the price for 3 years. So you've got some cost certainty for that short period. Harris Govern is a automatic 5% increase a year. So that 137 within a few years will be one. By the time we're done with it, we would have been somewhere around 150 for it. So
When will we start seeing that cost savings?
So
I guess when does that other contract end?
So what we're projecting is about 3.5 years. The conversion of Harris Govern to Munis will have completely paid for itself, and then you'll really start realizing that. But this year that we're in should be the last year that we're paying for Harris Govern.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate it. And unless anyone has anything further, we're going to move along. Thank you very much. We'll go back to well, Rich, are you going to be doing auditing?
Like I said, Council, I'm happy to do auditing and treasury as the last two to have people up here do their budgets. I'm here the whole night, so.
Okay, so why don't we save auditing and treasurer collector for last? And this way here, we can move along and go back to purchasing. Is that okay?
That's perfectly fine with me,
We'll do those
yes,
at the
yeah,
end?
for sure.
Okay, I appreciate it. Michael? Purchasing, section 2, page 19.
Good evening, councilors. So it's been a busy year in procurement. Not sure if you've noticed. Building a whole new DPW, that whole bidding process for that. Begun the new bidding process for the new Point of Pines Fire Station. And of course, the process for the new high school. We've currently done the CM at risk. Tried to hire the construction manager for that project. We've also done some little things. Some of these massive procurements are very complicated, so we've used some online biddings. First time ever in the city that we've done online bids, which really helps out my department to not have to handle 50-odd bids for a project like the DPW facility. We've started, excuse my allergies. We've implemented the WEX gas card system, which is basically credit cards that departments can use for the city vehicles. You can get gas at random gas stations around the city at a fixed fee. So not exactly what they're buying on the ticket itself. We've set up business accounts with Amazon and Staples for all the departments in the city to help with ordering and checking prices that they'd ordinarily just use WB Mason or someone else for. We've continued using Municibid. It's an online auction website to sell surplus equipment for the city. And to date, which is over like a year and a half, we've sold over $135,000 worth of items, which has gone into the general account. And that's it. It's going to be another busy year next year with all the ARPA procurements and everything else. So, onto my budget. Asking for an extra $20,000 in my postage and an extra $3,000 for office supplies. And that's about it.
Okay, pretty straightforward. Questions?
That's right.
If you don't mind.
Council President Visconti.
Michael, I always like looking at your budget.
Me too, Jerry.
One thing's consistent is it doesn't increase that much. And you guys push out a lot of work, both you and Arcadia, and it is pretty stable. So it's always a pleasure looking at your numbers, because I know it's, over the last few years that I've looked at it, it really hasn't changed much, and it's always
Not really,
good to
no.
see, you know, and I appreciate all the work that you and Arcadia do in that office. Thank you.
Thanks, Council.
Any other councilors have any questions, comments? Michael, thank you very much. Appreciate you being here. Keep that budget flat and everything will be great.
I'll try my best, Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, on to the Board of Assessors, Section 2, page 26. Dana?
Good evening. In the interest of time, I think I'll kind of skip the narrative and not repeat what's before you, but I'm more than happy to take any questions if you do have any on that. As far as the numbers go, similar to Michael's department, we're usually pretty status quo. So on the non-payroll expenditures, that is being level funded. On the payroll expenditures, there is one change where we had a retirement within the office. That was a full-time position years ago. It has morphed into a part-time position. The individual had it, kind of had an eye towards retirement, so he was kind of slowing down the last few years. We were able to cooperate with him, but certainly the rest of the staff picked up the slack on that. So we are requesting to turn that back into a full-time position. Obviously, there's major growth in the city in population and development. All we have to do is drive around, we can see that. So it certainly puts, that growth puts a lot of strain on my office as well. So being able to convert that position from part-time to full-time will help us, will help us, work towards that growth. And, we always want to have the utmost professionalism and provide the best services we can to constituents. So again, getting that position back to full-time will help us with that. But basically, that's the only change within our budget, and here for questions.
Thank you very much, Dana. Appreciate it. Any members of the committee have any questions? Council President Visconti.
Through you to Dana. Thank you, Dana, for being here. Quick question on the assessors and the field agents, I don't know what you call them, to be honest with you, that go out and assess those properties. Is there an appetite to get, or has there been an appetite to get somebody more in the commercial field rather than residential? I know we have the residential down pat. I really believe wholeheartedly that I think we're leaving a lot of money on the table with these commercial developers and developments, and I think they're underassessed. And that tax dollars could obviously help us quite a bit and help the residents. So is there somebody, is there an appetite to get somebody to, that's more concentrated in that field?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. The council was gracious enough last year to fund us. If you look under contracted services, there's a line item for commercial and industrial consulting services. So we were able to engage an individual who is expertise in commercial valuations to come in this year.
Okay.
And take a look at the commercial and the large apartment complexes. We also contracted out several individual appraisals on some properties that had some big sales that we wanted to get a little more background information on and have some support for next year's valuations. Obviously, we're in a transformational period in the city with regards to property values, not only residential, which has always, been growing, but more recently in the commercial and industrial field, right? So that kind of has been dormant in the city for several years, and now we're finally getting the recognition, part and parcel due to Suffolk Downs, and also the industrial warehouse distribution centers are realizing, hey, Revere is a great location, to have those distribution centers. So our commercial properties as a whole is kind of recently seeing that explosion, right? So, our values are lagged behind a couple years because that's the way assessments work. So, the good news is we're going to finally start to realize, the fruition of these commercial values increasing, which will hopefully benefit our residential taxpayers. But to answer your question, yes, we have already engaged somebody due to the monies that were budgeted last year, and we're requesting the same monies this year to keep that going.
Thank you.
Any other questions from councilors? I just have, Michael, I'm sorry, Dana, just one question for you. I'm just curious. You had asked for the reval for $136,000 and mayor appropriated $56,500 with a difference of $79,000. What was I'm just curious what the
Sure,
request was
yeah.
for.
So this is a revaluation year. As you know, the state moved from a 3-year reval program to a 5-year a couple years back. So this is a revaluation year. Obviously, through our third-party vendor, Patriot Properties, it's a much more in-depth analysis and a lot more lengthy, so the cost of that goes up during the revaluation years. So we did request that money, and we do have a contract for that. I believe the mayor requested to lower it down, and the thought process for that was every few years we analyze our overlay accounts, which is the amount of money we set aside each year for abatements and exemptions. And the Board of Assessors can release that overlay as overlay surplus. So we have identified that we would be able to fund that amount through the overlay surplus. So instead of funding it through the budget, I think the mayor decided to level fund it and make up that difference through us releasing overlay surplus.
So you can take overlay money? I thought overlay was strictly there for people that filed for abatements, no? That can be used for...
It is, but if there's a surplus, if you can identify that the outstanding appellate tax board and we project out future appellate tax board cases, what those settlements would be, and then also the exemptions, what that number would be, which we have a pretty good historical, number on that, so we know what those are going to be pretty much. You can release some of that money if there is a surplus. So just to throw numbers out there, these are not the real numbers, but if you had $2 million in overlay and you think you only have $1 million in liability, you could release that $1 million back to be used, I believe, in general funds.
And that wouldn't need to be appropriated by the city council?
It certainly wouldn't need to be appropriated.
Okay.
I was going to
Yeah.
jump in and just to pick up on what Dana's saying, we wanted to close fiscal year 2022, take a look at our books. We do know that we have overlay in excess of anticipated liabilities and real estate property receivables. So the idea would be to come back here in the fall. Well, first of all, the Board of Assessors would release overlay surplus. That overlay surplus can be used for any legal expenditure, much like free cash, but it is subject to the appropriation by the council. So we anticipate coming back before you in the fall and using some of that overlay surplus to fund the revaluation.
Okay, great. Well, let's hope we have no appellate tax court judgments that's going to put us over the edge.
We've actually forecasted out all of the potential liabilities, and we still have surplus. Even if we lost every single case, we will have surplus.
I estimate those very conservatively.
I'm sure that you do, Dana. I'm sure you do. Are there any other councilors that have any questions? You're doing a great job, Dana. We appreciate it. I know it's not an easy job with everything that's going on in the city.
Sure.
So keep up the good work.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that brings Mr. Viskey back to the podium for the treasurer collector and chief financial officer. Just for the edification of the council, you want to do the treasurer collector's budget first, which is on, if you want to do the treasurer collector, section 2, page 29.
Certainly, thank you, and I'm here on behalf of Kathy Bowden, the city treasurer collector. She apologizes. She had a prior vacation plan when these were scheduled, and told her I didn't think it would be too much trouble for me to handle her budget, and just due to the timing of the meeting, want to close at 7 o'clock. I will spare the narrative for that, but certainly if anyone has any questions with that, Councilor Visconti may be happy to see that this is another budget that is going down in fiscal year 2023. And to kind of piggyback on what George was talking about, and he deserves a lot of credit because this conversion from the old Govern Harris system to the Munis system on all the collector treasurer side of the operations is a huge endeavor, and ultimately it's going to save us time. And you can see in this particular budget, we're able to eliminate one full-time equivalent because of the synergies that we get with the collection side talking to the auditing and budgeting side. So a lot of these manual transactions that need to be done and these manual reconciliations that are done each and every month, each and every week are now automated. Not that we don't reconcile them anymore, but a lot of it is automated and it makes our job easier. So we're happy to present a budget that has one less full-time equivalent than prior years. And once fully automated with the water and sewer receivables, we hope to become even more efficient in our operation. As well as the efficiency on the labor side, we have realized a lot of savings on the expenditure side. We've been working closely to close out a lot of bank accounts that we felt were redundant. We've brought down our banking services. That we were absorbing some of the credit card fees, and that has gone away. So overall expenditures have went down. Full-time equivalents have went down. And we present to you a lean budget for fiscal year 2023. Happy to answer any particular questions you may have on that budget. Otherwise, I'll move on to the auditors.
Thank you very much, Rich. Any councilors with questions pertaining to the treasurer collector? Pretty straightforward. It's going down, going in the right direction, so I don't think you're going to have many councilors that are going to have a problem with this particular department. And by the way, Kathy Bowden historically has always done a tremendous job. We're very fortunate to have her. So
Yes, I agree. Her and her whole staff has
Yes.
been doing a lot of work in conjunction with this conversion from the government to the munis. So our collector's office, our treasurer's office, they've been doing double duty, running off two systems and really making sure that, this is 10 years worth of historical data that we transfer over every time we convert from one to another, and it's a lot of work ticking and tying and making sure it's a smooth transition. So I appreciate all of you out there if you're watching. Thank you.
Okay, well, we'll move on. This will be our last department that we'll be discussing this evening. This will be on section 2, page 16, under auditing.
Sure, thank you. Again, I'll spare some of the narratives. Happy to stand up here and boast about how great our department is, but I'd rather just try to talk about the numbers and then leave a little time for some of the questions on the opera stuff. So our budget has pretty much stayed level, other than the COLA increases that are awarded through collective bargaining and the parity ordinance. Our expenses are level funded, except for one, which is contract services. We have ClearGov, which is a software that allows us to put our budgeting package that you have before you online digitally. We've been actually working on this for over a year. We've loaded up 2 years worth of budgets. This will be the third year, and I think after this budget process, we will turn that front-facing so that the residents and stakeholders in the city, as well as the council and the city employees, could go right online and use the ClearGov software to research the budget. It has some pretty cool features, some bar graphs. It takes some data from Department of Revenue and the U.S. Census and really gives you a lot of bells and whistles on not only the budget itself, but some of the demographics. It also has a module for personnel budgeting that allows you to load in personnel budgeting and run some what-if scenarios that we typically do using spreadsheets and such. So we are requesting that the City Council fund the personnel budgeting part of that ClearGov software, but otherwise the expense budget is level funded with our audit services, our office supplies, and printing and mailing that we do to produce the budgets. So with that, I'm happy to answer any particular questions on my budget.
Thank you for that, Rich. Any councilors? Any councilors with any questions? Members of the committee?
Just one.
Council President Visconti.
I noticed last budget, I think we budgeted for a grant writer that was put in your budget, if I'm not mistaken. and I don't see it in your budget anymore.
The grant writer was proposed as a position. It was being contemplated going to the CFO's budget, and that was going to be funded through ARPA funds. We did not hire that position.
Okay.
We didn't really expend any money on it because it was fully offset by grant dollars, and working with the mayor's office to kind of reimagine that position. We do think it's a worthwhile position, but the idea is, like you spoke of with ARPA funds, we'd like to hire someone that can do grant writing and seek out grants that will actually pay for itself in perpetuity. But just for a bunch of different reasons with turnover and such, we never really fulfilled that. And then I just kind of dropped it off my budget because really we're trying to find out where the best place for that to be, whether in planning or auditing or the mayor's office. So it's still being researched, and we deferred it for fiscal year '23.
Thank you. Any other councilors with any questions for Mr. Viskey? Councilor Keefe, did you have a question?
Similar to, I was going to ask a similar question as Council President Visconti, but I did want to say, I know this is day one, and, Mr. Viskey, you do a very nice job. And we mentioned this the other night with getting us the budgets in a timely fashion, very organized. So I look forward to the next couple days going through the sessions with you and the Ways and Means group. Ultimately, just looking at it as a whole, what areas? Sorry, I know you were suggesting a few departments. You get excited when you see level funding, right? We get excited, Councilor Visconti, Councilor Rizzo. We like to see that level fund. We don't like to see these big highs. There are a few areas that have come up with some spikes and/or some creative financing, right? Or some creative budgeting. What do you see when that comes across your desk? Are there any specific departments and/or across this whole book that you think might be a little bit out of touch? Just out of curiosity.
No.
I tried.
I expected that answer.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, I'm sure you'll hear more from us.
I'm sure as well.
Thank you.
I don't think we have I don't think there's any more questions, but as we look at the total departmental expense, $612,571 was what the department requested, and the mayor authorized $611,571. How much fighting went on over that $1,000 that you couldn't get in the budget? Did you know?
I let them have $1,000, Counselor. Everyone needs to have a little skin in the game here.
You really gave it up this time, Rich. Okay, well, if there's nothing further.
Do you guys want a brief presentation on that, Hopper? And I know it's 7. I'm in no rush.
I'm sorry. Were you going to go through that? That's fine.
I volunteered to.
I don't have a problem.
I'm happy to go through it. I'm in no rush. I will stay here as long as you like. So. I can start off with it tomorrow. I'm here every night for budget, so I'm happy to oblige.
His presentation.
Yeah, well, that's a good idea. We can conclude now. We're at 7 o'clock, and maybe we can begin tomorrow. That's a good idea, Council President Visconti. We'll have you start off tomorrow with the presentation on the ARPA funds. This way here we can let everyone go at 7 o'clock as we had planned.
Yeah, happy to do it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you. I would like to thank everybody who appeared before us tonight. I'd like to thank the councilors who came here and participated in the discussions. I'd like to thank our city clerk, Ashley Melnick. And we will resume. We will be back here tomorrow at 5 p.m. for our second round of budget conversations.
All right. And if anyone needs anything, please don't hesitate to reach out through email or otherwise.
Thank you very much. That'll conclude the June 8th meeting of the Ways and Means Subcommittee.